and there has been a call for an independent, public, and open commission of inquiry into the suppression of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases, which has been referred to the NPA, and they total above 300. To talk to us about the implications of all of this is former Truth Commissioner and human rights lawyer Yasmin Sooka. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program, and shukran for your time.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Yasmin, at this point, at this stage, 20 odd years into our democracy, we are still looking at issues around cases that cases through the TRC that were referred to the NPA, and we've heard nothing about those cases. What's the status quo on all of that?
Well, it's almost 23 years ago that the Truth Commission handed over a list of 300 cases to the NPA and, of course, to the Ministry of Justice. And that was done on the basis that when people had been denied amnesty, or if they had not applied for amnesty, then the law should follow its course. Now, in the 23 years since then, we've only had 3 inquests in the court, and we've had, sets of perpetrators being charged. But all of those instances have come about because the families have put pressure on the government through litigation. Now, at the inaugural Kalata Foundation lecture, which was on the 4th of November or 5th of November, the minister announced that, yes, they were making more resources available to the NPA. But he also said that he would be appointing a judge to look into the executive suppression of the TRC cases. The suppression of the TRC cases came up because in 2017, the head of the NPA, Busi Pikoli, in an affidavit that he filed in the court papers in the Simalani matter, said that he had been pressurized not to investigate these cases, and that when he took them up, he actually was suspended. And then, of course, in the Supreme, in the full bench appeal in the Rodriguez matter, who was accused in the Ahmed Timor matter, another 2 prosecutors said, well, the executive placed pressure on us, and there was political interference. And so the full bench said that the matter needs to be properly investigated, and the Supreme Court of Appeals agreed with that. Now, our contention with the minister is that it is not, we don't want a judge to be appointed under his internal rules to investigate the executive. If you want this kind of proper investigation, it has to be done under the Commission of Inquiries Act. It also has to be done by the President. This is not within the realm of the minister's power. And the Constitutional Court is very clear in the case of Willem Heath that judges should not be appointed to do the internal work of the executive, because this flouts the separation of powers. And in this case, because the executive is responsible for 2 things. The one is the suppression of investigation, but also secondly, there are many allegations out there that a deal was made between the executive and high-ranking senior officials in the government and with former administrators. Now, these are the 2 issues which a judge or a commission of inquiry has. And what we feel is that appointing a judge to do this kind of work behind closed doors is just not going to cut it. The minister was also asked that night, so will the judge have powers? Will he be able to have an open inquiry? And he was very hesitant to respond on that. What he actually said is that he would have to talk to the judge. Now, when you appoint a proper commission of inquiry under the proper legal framework, there is no question of it. The judge will have powers to subpoena witnesses, the judge will be able to secure evidence, and the judge will, of course, be able to have open public hearings. And of course, one must remember that the bedrock of the work of the Truth Commission is openness, transparency, and independence. And this is really what we are looking for in having any kind of inquiry. I think our country deserves to know why victims have been prejudiced by 23 years of failure by the democratic government. So at the end of the day, perpetrators are died. You only have to look at the recent deaths to understand how this is compromising cases. The death recently of Mr. Leclerc, the death of Ja Rodriguez, the death of many, many other perpetrators who have failed to provide truth to the victims and their families.
So, Yasmin, basically, these 300 odd cases that we're talking about, and even when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was active at the time, it was really about giving families closure. Why is there this reluctance? I mean, any and every family member just want to know what happened to my loved one, how did it happen, and then hopefully they can move on. Perhaps, and this is just a wild thought, is it, does this involve payouts, some sort of recompensation for loss of earnings to that particular family, etc.? And is it maybe a question of these payouts running into hundreds of millions of rands, and that is why there is a reluctance from the ministers and government as a whole to try and suppress these hearings?
It's a very tricky question because, at the end of the day, amnesties are not permitted under international law. And the only reason ours really passed muster was because it was going to be through an open process, which would be transparent. The victims would oppose the process. But the law also was very clear. If you did not apply, or if you were refused amnesty because you didn't make a disclosure, then of course the law should follow its course. So, at the same time, you also had, remember, there was the case of Azapo and a number of famous families, apartheid victim families, who took the constitutionality of the TRC legislation to the court. And many of them also alleged that the law was too far-ranging because it also affected their right to claim compensation. And of course, the court, in a very political judgment, upheld the constitutionality of the legislation, but on the basis that the state would pay reparations. Now, in many of these cases, obviously, we're not just talking of, the normal kind of compensation. You're talking about people who've been breadwinners and whose families have been, affected in terms of the quality of their life by the loss of a loved one. So in those cases, technically, they could, receive reparation. But obviously, the reparations will be totally inadequate in terms of what they would be able to claim if they were to bring a damages claim in the courts. So I'm not sure that that's really the issue, because there is money in the President's Fund to pay out reparations. I think the real issue that we should ask is, why is the executive so keen to engage again with the apartheid perpetrators? Because at the end of the day, it is about the truth emerging. And I think that there's a lot of speculation around, the fact that there may have been some people during the transition who didn't believe that the Truth Commission should be established. There are many others who say that this also affects a whole network of informers, which seems to be an issue that keeps coming up in South Africa. But whatever the reason, I think families and South Africans need to know why the suppression.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you for being with us on the show. Yasmin Sooka, former Truth Commissioner and human rights lawyer, talking about, obviously, the issue on the TRC cases that seem to be, well, for a while have been muffled, but there seems to be an inquiry that's going to start up once again. 8:47 exactly, news and views right here on Salam Media.
Every 60